Joining us today is Billy Thomas. Billy is the owner of Hiwassee Island Luxury RV Resort. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's up on Upper River Road. And we have a common friend that's was a friend of both of ours. We're going to discuss him in detail. It's going to be a great discussion. Billy, we met years ago at John Paul Douglas's office, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, probably so. I was in real estate. I was with Wade Williams and Joanne Davis, All-Stars.
About what year was that?
Ooh, that would have been around 90.
Because I was at John Paul's office and you came in, and that's about all I remember.
Yeah. Well, see, I had a business downtown in the Craig Miles building called Rental Resources, and it was licensed through the Real Estate Commission, and it was a apartment locator, kind of a matchmaking service where I listed rental property, and John Paul was one of my clients there that listed some of his rental property with me. I would take the applications from the prospective tenants and screen them, do the credit checks, employment verification, all that. If they come in looking for an apartment in the $450, $500 range, 3-bedroom, John Paul's got one listed. I'd put the two of them together. I get an application fee from the tenant, get first half months of the first month's rent out of the owner.
Pretty good business, I guess, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was never going to make any kind of big money, and I got tired of walking up and down those steps at the Craig Miles building.
Isn't that like three levels or something, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was on the top. Yeah.
Whenever you read a story in the newspaper or see something on television about somebody getting arrested, you naturally assume they're guilty. Unless the story's about you or someone you love, then you'll think differently. And you'll want a lawyer who will defend you. My name's Scott Canavis. If you or someone you love has been charged with a crime, call me. I'll return your phone calls, I'll work on your case, and I will defend you.
When you said $450, $500, that was the rent. But that was the rent. Do you remember when $350 was the rent amount?
The first house that I rented in Cleveland, this was back in the 70s, $100 a month. Yeah.
And then that jumped to $280, I remember.
$250.
I remember the first duplex I built, I needed to get $280, and they didn't think I could get it.
All right.
And then that evolved into the $350.
Yeah. What do you get for them now?
And now I was talking to a guy earlier today about what rents are, and
crazy.
I hear what some people are getting, but I just almost don't believe it.
Yeah, and I don't know how renters are paying that.
That's what I told him.
And why would they pay it when they can own? But a lot of renters just don't know how to purchase, or just don't think they can purchase.
I mean, I'm renting some stuff $700, and people say I should be getting $1,100. Well, I'm not that far off.
Well, I used to build apartments. I was a licensed general contractor way back, and I built quadruplexes mainly. And people would come to me and say, "Hey, if you build me one of these, what's the most I can get out of the rent?" I said, "Well, that's not the way to look at it."
Right.
I said, if you keep your rent a little bit below market value and you give them good value for their dollar, you're probably going to be 100% occupied for a much longer period of time. I said, if you're overpriced, they're always going to be looking in the banner at that time, looking in the paper for a cheaper place to move. And I said, and when they move, you got to patch and paint and shampoo and all that stuff, plus loss of rent,
Yeah.
plus. And I said, if you do the numbers, especially on a quadruplex or a multi-unit building, I'll make these figures up, at $500 a month, 100% occupancy versus $650 a month at 75% occupancy, you see which one makes them more money, especially when you factor in all those repairs and maintenance. And
Well, that's exactly what I was telling him this morning. And I remember back when rents were $475 and I was getting $400, and I thought, I'm going to just keep this thing vacant until I get $475.
all right.
And it took me like a month and a half to 2 months. And I figured it up. It took me 16 months of that other
Wow.
$25 to catch that
Yeah.
1 month that I lost
Yeah, right.
trying to get it.
All right.
16 months.
Yeah.
So I
that's-
would rather, I've always thought it was 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. If you rent them cheap, you're less likely to have repairs because
All right.
they're typically not going to call you if they think they've got a good rent rate.
Yeah.
And if you charge too much, you're going to get 10 months out of the year instead of 12.
All right. Yeah, you have to factor in all
And
those.
if you get a real nice apartment, then you're probably not going to rent it for the payments that you have today.
All right.
And if you rent something cheap, you're going to rent it good, but you're going to have more maintenance. So the thing to do is just stay in the middle of the road and charge a little bit lower than standard, and
Right.
and not figure on making money off of it. You're just paying
Yeah,
off
just
debt.
get it to pay for itself.
That's all you're doing.
All right.
If you go in the rental business thinking you're going to make money to live, you got a rude awakening, don't you?
You have to have a ton of properties if you're going to make money. You know, I always tell people, just like with any small business, be exterminator or lawn mowing, you can typically make more money yourself with you and your equipment and your truck rather than having 2 or 3 trucks and extra equipment, breakdowns, lost work time, people laying out of work, jobs not getting done. You have to get past that point to where you have 20 or 50 crews. Then you can start making money.
Then you can hire managers to oversee, and I've never been one to do that. I'm too much of a micromanager. I've got to go see it
Yeah.
before I can get it off my mind.
Well, I've always been hands-on, but I also, I had mobile home parks for decades. That's a whole different
That's a whole
class.
nother thing.
That's a different industry by far, but I would have a manager and a maintenance guy because the mobile homes needed regular maintenance.
Yeah.
You know, they were built cheap and
Yeah.
they would tear up, and plus the clients that you would have, you know, were not real good about taking care of things.
Yeah.
So.
Well, water line busted and stuff underneath,
And they don't care, you know. Even house renters sometimes don't, but in the mobile home park, I know one time I paid the water on all the mobile homes. I owned every mobile home in this particular park, and our water bill spiked, and it spiked the next month. And I said, you know, we've got a leak somewhere. We look all over the property, we can't find anything. We put a notice out to all the residents. If you have a running faucet or a running commode, you know, let us know. We want to fix it because we're paying for that. And so it's not going to be held against you. You're not going to be charged anything. We just need to maintain it. Well, about 2 months later, a guy comes into the manager's office. Hey, you remember that notice you put out a couple of months ago about running faucets and stuff? Yeah. I got a commode in my second bathroom. We don't ever use it, but it runs all the time. It didn't have a flush kit in it. You know, it was just constantly
Golly.
running 24/7. So I go down to confront this tenant, and I had a bunch of spare change in my pocket. I reach in my pocket. I said, hey, and I start throwing these coins out on the street while I'm talking to him about his leak. What are you doing? I said, well, this is what you are doing to me. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You're throwing my money down the sewer. I said, you know, why didn't you let us know about this leak? Yeah. But that's, you know, part of being a landlord.
being a landlord is different, isn't it? I mean, it's just different.
It is. It's
Did you find that when you got credit checks that it helped or not?
no.
That's right.
I would have owners to say, now, if I use your service, you got to send me good people. I said, look, I'm going to screen them every way we can screen them. But I said, there's no way for me to know that after they get into your house or your apartment, he's going to come home early from work one day and find her in bed with his buddy and he's going to bust the place up. Mm-hmm. Or there's no way to know she's got a pill problem. She's going to start slinging stuff through the walls. Mm-hmm. I didn't show up on a credit check or employment verification. Right. So I send you the best I can, but you're taking a chance anytime you rent a property.
I remember John Paul one time, somebody had told me that I need to start getting credit checks. So I made this real nice form, and I was standing at the copy machine. John Paul, he was real smart on that stuff.
All right.
He said, what are you doing, Dee? And I said, I'm going to start getting credit checks on everybody. And he said, Dee, don't do that. He said, you're just wasting your time. Right. He said, not everybody has good credit. Right. And he says, just look at their car and see how they keep their car.
Exactly. That's I've had several people to tell me that's how they screen their tenants, by looking in their car. Now, if you go out and look at my car right now, you wouldn't rent to me.
Well, mine's only in the front seat. It's organized chaos, but it's one spot. And I need all that stuff. You find you need all that stuff in your car?
Not anymore. I just about
What would be in your front seat?
Typically in my front seat is just my satchel. I have a soft bag satchel that I carry with my checkbooks and my columnars and everything that I do need for the day, my bill file, different things.
Do you have anything in the floorboard?
Typically no, unless I'm taking my lunch. I have a refrigerator in my office. I might take my lunch, put the Tupperwares down in the floor to keep them from dumping, but typically no. Now, the trunk of my car, I may have, and it's a Mercedes luxury sedan, I may have shovels and rakes in it.
Screwdrivers, Allen wrenches.
Yeah, just whatever. I mean, I treat it like a work truck, basically, because I still have jobs where I have to go meet a guy, take him something or whatever. And so
I sometimes I'll have an issue with something and I'll have to buy something to fix it, and I'll keep that in my floorboard, and I'm afraid to take it out because when I take it out, I'll need it, and as long as I leave it in the floorboard, I'm not going to need it. Right. So it's sort of a superstition. So I leave it there for a while.
All right. But yeah, rental property is. It's great, because I can be floating down the river in my boat, rolling down the interstate in my motorhome. I still get paid. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. I said, they still got to pay their rent. So I like that about it.
Yeah.
But this thing here never goes off. It never stops. Text, emails, calls, day and night. Not so much now because I've sold all my mobile home parks and all my rentals basically.
Are you relieved? Is there any part of that you almost wished you still had?
The residual income, yeah.
Because that's pretty good on those, right?
Oh yeah. It's and mobile homes. See, I had mobile home dealerships as well, and I had 12 trucks and 20-something guys moving them, hauling them, tearing them down, refurbing them, repossessing them. And I would buy repossessed mobile homes from mortgage companies for pennies on the dollar. And if I had an empty lot in my park or I had a dilapidated mobile home in my park, I'd pull it out, bring in a new repo that we had refurbished and rent it and make a killing. Years ago, I was trying to get refinanced on one of my parks, and I went to Bank of Cleveland, and Scott Taylor and Terry Buckner came to the park. They don't like trailer parks. They don't like trailers, and I certainly understand that. And we're standing in the middle of the park, and like I said earlier, I owned every home in that park. And I said, you see that trailer right there? I said, I paid $2,000 for that trailer 12 years ago. It rents for $500 a month. I don't give a flip that it depreciated. It's a cash cow. That one I paid $4,500 for 8 years ago. It rents for $600 a month. I said, I own every home in this park. $500,000, $1,500, $2,000, $2,500, $3,000, $3,500. we never looked at it like that. Yeah, we'll finance this. So they took over the financing for me and rocked on with it.
I think financing is where the money's at, don't you?
Well, yeah.
Because then you don't have a product, you just have the money.
Right, yeah. And I did a lot of owner financing when I had my dealership, Repo Depot. I'd buy the homes, refurbish them, sell them. And that's one thing that I enjoyed doing. I was able to put people in homes, even though it'd be a mobile home. I could put people in a home that there's no possible way they could own a home without someone like myself doing what I did for them. Give me $2,000 down, I'll set you up on payments, you know. And they all paid out. I never had to repo one of my own homes. And like I say, you just go to the P.O. box and get your mortgage check. No maintenance, no insurance, no upkeep. You know, it's great. And I had a bunch of them at one time.
Isn't it funny that you're almost coming full circle with the Hiwassee project? And not that it's mobile home, but it's RV park. It's similar in nature, right?
It is similar. This one is a luxury RV resort, so it's above what I used to own, which is mobile home parks typically. Clientele is a little different.
Yeah.
I had an ex-girlfriend years ago in the truck with me one day, and I said, I need to run out to the park and get the rent from my manager, and so she's in the truck with me. When they see me pull in, the owner, they run up, hey, boss man, hey.
Yeah.
We pull back out, this is on South Lee Highway. We pull back out on South Lee Highway, and she looks at me and said, Billy, why don't you get good people in your trailer park? I said, I've got good people.
Yeah.
But I said, they rent a trailer in a trailer park. I said, you can't fill a trailer park with professionals and executives. I said, I don't have druggies, I don't have roommates, they're all families, and they're good people. But, they rent trailers in a trailer park, so that says enough.
Isn't it sad that some people have to live that way, or is it some people that's just a preferred living? They're not necessarily poor. It's hard to. I hate to refer to people as poor, don't you?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's a.
But I see a lot of that, and I see a lot of people that or did see when I was in the business, that are second and third generation trailer park kids. They don't know any better. That's for a lot of them, their life goal is to get approved for disability, because when they get approved for disability, they think they've got it made. They're set for life. And I said, look, you're not set for life. I said, you got to build assets and build credit. I said, you can't make a good living drawing a disability check, drawing free money. I said, so, your goal is not quite what it needs to be. I try to mentor people.
But to make the argument, why do we need to try to get wealthy?
Well, you don't. I mean, calling what you personally want for yourself.
Just so you can spend money on something that some people just don't want that.
Yeah,
they don't have any desire.
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine, a high school buddy of mine. He's got over $1 million in the stock market. He doesn't go anywhere. He doesn't do anything. He won't spend his money. He sits at home and watches the stock market and watches money go up and down. That's what he does for jollies.
That's his game.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's fine for him. Now, I couldn't do it. I like spending mine. I like toys.
Like what?
Well, I have a yacht. I've got your brother's been on it, Bo. It's a 53-foot Carver yacht.
Where you keep it?
4 levels. It's on the Hiwassee, right at Agency Creek, right at the Highway 58 bridge. I wanted it to be at B&B, because that's where I've always been. I had the best lot on the river there at B&B. When you come in off the river into B&B, there's that point on the right. I had my motorhome there on that point. Best lot in the whole river. we see everybody that comes and goes, hey, Billy, hey, Tina, you know, have all the conveniences of the restaurant, the bar, the ice, you know, the gas, you know, and they've done a great job there too. You know, I think you had Ryan on.
Yeah, Ryan, yeah.
Yeah, great people, and they've really transformed that marina. But I took my RV to my resort and put it on a lot there when I bought this boat. It was in Gunnersville, Alabama, on Gunnersville Lake. Well, Alan Jones relinquished me one of his slips because he kept 2 slips there, but now he's built a humongous dock at his river house. And so I thought, you know, maybe he'll give me one of those. And, yeah. Yeah. And, so I called him, and he knows me. I used to own Earl's Restaurant downtown, and we leased that restaurant from Jones Properties. But and he agreed to do it. So I go over and I measured the width and I measured the depth of the water. So I have 5 feet to float. And I get up here from Alabama in this monster-sized boat, and I'm backing into the slip. And I got guys standing on each end of the docks to throw ropes to. And I'm backing in. Whoa, whoa, whoa! I stopped. I went back to the back. I needed about 3 more feet to clear all those radars and sonars and all on the top. Because Alan's boat, it was a little longer than mine, but it was a Sea Ray, which is more sleek. Mine is stacked up higher. So then I'm in a dilemma. You know, I've got this monster boat up here and no place to put it. So I called Scott and Linda Jones, who have Hidden Harbor there on 58, and they have a long dock for their restaurant. And I called them, and they said, well, you can park at the restaurant dock because we're not going to open the restaurant this year. This was year before last, I think. And so I parked there until a slip came open at Agency Creek right there next door.
So now, which one has the little restaurant there? Is that Hidden Cove?
Yeah, Hidden Harbor. Yeah.
Hidden Harbor. I've ate there some last year.
Yeah, Wes Eisenberger just took it over, and they've reopened it.
It was good food.
Yeah, it's good now. Yeah, Wes is going to do a good job, I'm sure.
Were so did you have your boat there at one time or next to it at Agency Creek?
I just had it there during maybe a month,
Okay.
you know, while I was waiting for a slip to put it in. We looked at expanding one of the slips at B&B, but it was a little costly, and that water's not quite deep enough in the off season. You know, the water dropped 6 feet, and like I say, I got to have 5 feet to float. So we just, when the slip came up at Agency, and we've got great neighbors there, boat neighbors. Debbie Godfrey's in a houseboat right next door to us. Bobby Patton and Heather right straight across from us.
Did you know her brother Bobby?
Oh yeah, Bobby Godfrey.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Larry does all my big site work. Yeah.
Me and Bobby, would you believe that I went out to 58 Shortstop one night? It was like 10 o'clock at night. I just drove up there, got a cup. So I used to do that. I used to drive from Cleveland up there and back and get a cup of coffee.
Oh, yeah.
That was my thing to do.
Right.
And I ran into Bobby, and he said, come out here with me. And he went over to Hidden Harbor where he had his boat.
All right.
And we got in his boat, and we were gone till 2:30 in the morning. You know how Bobby was.
Yeah.
He had no time.
Yeah. Great guy.
Great guy.
Yeah.
I got his picture in there.
No.
So, but anyway, then we didn't have cell phones then, and nobody knew where I was at.
All right.
It was 2:30 in the morning, and that was 2 weeks before he died.
Oh really? Wow.
What are the odds of that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was tragic. But yeah, I know that whole family. Like I say, Larry, you know, he does all my big excavation work.
Larry was married to Debbie, right?
Right.
That's how she
Yeah,
she was Eddie Stiles' sister.
Yeah. I call Eddie Stiles cousin Eddie because him and my wife are cousins.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My wife was a Stiles.
Did you know Maynard?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't, but my wife.
I knew Maynard
that
well.
was her family. You know. Yeah. Yeah, he was a character, wasn't he?
Oh yeah. You know, I was riding. I was at the Ponderosa.
Yeah.
And Maynard was there. I knew him just a little bit, and my car tore up. And Maynard opened the hood and took off the radiator cap, and it sprayed in his face. I mean, hot.
Oh.
and Maynard was cussing and everything else, anyway, I said, Maynard, I'm so sorry. He said, it's all right, son. I shouldn't have taken the lid off. I never will forget that.
Yeah, I've heard he was a pretty interesting
He was
character.
smart.
Yeah.
Maynard was smart.
Yeah. I think all those Godfrey boys were
Oh,
smart.
yeah.
You know?
All of them, yeah. Every last one of them.
Yeah.
Even Jake, the daddy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you've been in Cleveland your whole life?
Yeah, I was born and raised here. My parents came here in the 40s to go to Lee. I'm not even sure it was Lee at that time, but my mother and father, you wouldn't know them unless you were Church of God, because that was their entire being. They worked at the Church of God International offices their entire lives till they retired. But yeah, I was born and raised here. When I graduated in '76, back then, Cleveland was a totally different little town.
Sure.
It rolled up at 10 o'clock at night, and only people out on the street had blue lights on top of their cars, There was no liquor by the drink, so there were no nice chain restaurants. So I thought, I'm going to get out of this little podunk town. Actually, I got in some trouble. I don't know if we want to go there or not, but I'm willing. So I moved to Atlanta, and I lived there for 14 years.
How old were you then?
That was in '77. I was 19.
So you was just young.
Yeah, I lived there till I was 32.
What's a long time?
Yeah, I had a blast, but again, I got in tremendous amount of trouble. And I don't mind telling people my past because I've clearly overcome it. Back in '77, I worked for Lamar Lawson at the old jail, downtown First Street. And I got arrested by Lamar and his crew.
While working for him?
Right after he had let me go. I had gotten into drugs, and they raided my house. And I've got out there in the car a copy of the front page of the Cleveland Banner, November 18th of 1977.
And you was just 19?
Yeah. I was selling PCP, with angel dust, which is a horse tranquilizer. And I got a reduced sentence because I was connected with everybody who was anybody, as connected as you could be at that age. But they had to put me in a single cell this was at the old jail. They had to put me in a single cell for my own protection because other inmates knew that I had worked there, and they thought I was a plant.
Yeah,
And so I had to be put in a single, 1,148 bricks in that cell. I counted them more than once.
How long was you there?
They originally gave me 16 weekends, but I didn't. I was working construction for B&J Construction up at Olin. I said, I don't want to work all week and then go to jail all weekend for 16 weekends. I said, can I just not do it all in one stretch? So I did, I think it was 30 days, and it wasn't too bad, but.
Did you make any money off that?
Oh, yeah. And again, I don't mind telling about my past because, I've overcome it. I was an addict up until the age of 32. The years that I spent in Atlanta, out of the 14 years, I was never out of jail for over 6 months at any one time. I have a copy of my criminal record.
From 19 to 32?
Yeah.
Golly.
Yeah, I've been in 8 jails, 4 prisons. Never did any long stints, never any major crimes, just stupidity and drugs and driving without license repeatedly.
Once you get in the system, it's hard to get out, isn't it? Isn't that part of the problem?
Yeah, it is. I've got a guy that works for me now. He finally got his license back. It's been years without him. Great guy, hard worker, but he try to drive to work, and they'd get him. And there it starts back over. More fines, more bonds, more lawyers' fees.
I got a guy that works for me that's more honest than me and you.
Yeah.
And he's been in jail. I think he was there the last time for like maybe three or four years. And I guarantee you, he's probably not really done nothing wrong. He's just in the system
Right.
somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, like you say, he don't have a license, so he'll drive to work and they'll catch him. And they stopped him the other day for no seatbelt, scared him to death.
Right.
And I thought, oh, good grief, they're going to get him back into. Because can't they stop us all for doing something?
Yeah, sure.
Even selling or PCP,
Yeah.
wasn't that sort of a common thing in '77?
Well, yeah.
I mean,
back in the drug days, I guess you'd say.
well, I mean, even when I was growing up, people were, trading marijuana and stuff. I mean, it's just a.
PCP was pretty rough stuff. Though.
That speed, is that speed?
No, it's actually a horse tranquilizer. And in that newspaper article, I had a picture of Sheriff Lawson and Steve Lawson, who was a deputy at the time, a couple other detectives standing behind a table, and the table's covered with guns and money and police interceptor radios, all the stuff they got at my house. And in the article, they interviewed a local veterinarian, and he says PCP is considered one of the most dangerous drugs on the illicit drug market today. It is known to cause hallucinations and similar effects of that of LSD. It is used primarily in zoos on monkeys and horses.
So it was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it was fun, but
What was it? When did you say at 32? What was the turning point?
well,
Was there a moment?
yeah, I was in prison in South Georgia.
Yeah, tell me the turning point.
Yeah, well, I mentioned how I was raised. My mom and dad,
Sure.
Lifelong members of the Church of God, high up officials in the international headquarters. My grandfather, he lived to 103. He was the oldest living Church of God ordained minister in the world at the time of his death at 103 years old. Old fire and brimstone, sawdust tent revival. God's gonna get you.
Bible thumping, T.R. Larry type.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so I was in this prison in Georgia, and there were 70-something convicts locked in this pod with me. And I was on the top bunk, and I sat up, and I looked around, and what the hell am I doing? I know better than this. I was raised better than this. And I just made a conscious decision. I said, my party's been great, but this party's over. And I called my mom and dad, and I said, hey, I need to come back home, because I've been in Atlanta for 14 years. Well, of course, they welcomed me with open arms. Prodigal son returns. Moved back at home with my mom and dad at 32. They bought me a Swin mountain bike. That's how
How'd you get out of jail?
I got released at the end of my sentence.
Okay, so but at 32, how long was it when you, let's say you saw it or you come to, how long was it till you got out?
Probably wasn't real long, weeks or months.
So you were getting close to.
Yeah. And so I moved back home with mommy and daddy at 32 years old. I had lost my family. I had a wife and 2 kids. Wasn't allowed any contact with them at all. That's a story within itself. Have a great relationship with them now. But like I say, they bought me a Swin mountain bike because I was a habitual violator. My license were gone for years. And I used to ride from their house on Oakland Drive off 25th Street to Ronnie's gym downtown. It was open 24 hours a day. It was the only one back in those days that you could go into 24/7. I'd work out, and I'd go to a Bible study or something at night, and just saw people like Dwayne Morrow, Tom Cate, people I went to school with that were now bankers and commissioners, and Robert Thompson, lawyer. I thought, damn, man, I got some catching up to do. So I started working for Jim Sharp, and that's how I got into developing. Jim, was Cleveland's premier developer, residential development. But I got my general contractor's license in residential and commercial. real estate license, mobile home dealer's license, water and sewer contractor's license. Had so many licenses I couldn't enjoy my favorite one. That was my hunting and fishing license.
Yeah.
But I just stayed straight, worked hard, and I went to Dwayne at Citizens Bank, and that's where I know your brother from. My wife worked there for 22 years as well. And I said, Dwayne, I said, you know, I want to get some rental property. And that was one thing that Jim Sharp taught me. He took me in the truck one day. He said, Bill, I want you to ride with me up to this little development I did in Athens. I said, okay. And I was just a laborer, operating tractor, grubbing lots and burning brush and that kind of stuff. Had long hair still. You know. And on the way up there, Jim says, Billy, he said, where are you going to be 5 years from now?
He always come up with that 5 years.
Yeah. I said, Jim, I don't know. I said, you know, I just kind of take it day by day. He said, Billy, you got to set goals for yourself. You can't hit the target if you don't know what the target is. You need to set yourself some goals. Set some long-term goals and some short-term goals. That way, when you get up in the morning, you know what you need to do to hit those goals. You got something to work towards. And so, I thought, you know, that makes sense. So that night, I made some goals. My long-term goals were I wanted to get my first rental property the first year, get 2 more the second year, which will give me 3 more the third year, give me 6, and on and on and on. My short-term goals were to repair my credit, because my credit was destroyed, get my license back, and so on. So I went to Dwayne, and I said, Dwayne, you know, I want to buy a rental property. Bought my first little house over what's now Lee University, $16,000. But Dwayne told me what was on my credit that was hurting my credit. It's mainly hospital bills and ambulance bills from DUI wrecks and that sort of stuff. Paid all them off. Credit shot up, and Dwayne gave me the money to buy my first rental. And sold out, rented it for a little while, renovated it in the off hours after working for Jim. You know, ripped out the cabinets, the carpet, painted and all that. Rented it for a little while, and then I sold it, and I made, I think, $10,000. I used that to buy my first tract of land, because I'd watched Jim for however long I'd worked for him, and I had met everyone in the industry. You know, at that time it was John Kinder and Cleveland Surveying.
Oh, yeah, John.
Tag Construction, Randy and
Randy and
Bob
Bob.
Lonis Paving. But I had met all these guys and had a rapport with them because I was Jim's guy.
Yeah.
And so I bought this little 4 acres out off of Old Harrison Pike. And I said, well, it's just a rectangular piece of property, had an old farmhouse on it. I said, well, I can demolish that farmhouse, put a road down the middle and a cul-de-sac, and cut that into lots. And I said, I'm going to build my first apartment on the first lot. And I did. I built a quadruplex. I sold it after I got it built and rented. Made $27,000. Used that money to put down on the 50 acres on Michigan Avenue Road where I built Peachtree Point Mobile Home Park. That was at the time, that was in the early mid-90s, one of the largest, if not the largest, residential developments in Bradley County, 234 lots. Swim, tennis, you know, nice upscale manufactured housing community is what it was called.
Yeah.
But, and that's when I got out of real estate. When I started that development, I had no experience in the mobile home business whatsoever. I just knew that mobile home parks were gold mines for residual income. I'd lived in some nice ones in Atlanta during my time there. And I thought, I'm going to build, there's not a nice mobile home park in Cleveland. I'm going to build a nice one, an upscale one. And so I ordered my first double wide from Clayton Homes to use as a temporary office. Well, at that time, I was still a general contractor and I was building. They brought this new double wide in, sat it on the lot. 3 days later, it's ready to move into. I thought, man, I like that. I can make as much off of that when I sell it as I can on a spec house. And you know what it takes to build a spec house. I said, I found my niche. So I let my contractor's license go, my real estate license go, because I knew I was where I wanted to be. And the rest is history. I've owned, I don't know how many mobile home parks, 6 or 8 mobile home dealerships, ran trucks.
I remember when you developed that out there on Michigan. That doesn't seem like that long ago, but I guess it's been that long.
Yeah.
Didn't Max Everhart buy the front lot from you or from somebody?
No.
He had that metal building there with the
Talk across the street?
on the same side of the street as you, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm not sure who bought that building.
But I remember when you developed that.
Yeah. Well, George, our buddy George McCoy,
Yeah.
he was my attorney at the time because he was still,
Yeah.
he was by far, without question, the premier
Yeah.
real estate attorney in Cleveland. He was my attorney. And so we go before the planning commission, as me and George going to the courthouse. I've got my plans rolled up.
Yeah.
Courthouse standing room only. They're holding up signs, no trailer park, no trailer park. So we sit down and commission, I can't remember who the chairman was at the time, but he said, Mr. Thomas, he said, a lot of people gathered here in opposition against your development. He said, would you like to take the stand first? And I said, yes, sir. And so I go up to the stand, I've got my plans with me. I said, ladies and gentlemen of the commission, what you're about to hear out of all these people gathered in opposition against me is a lot of biased and prejudiced opinions based solely on ignorance. Mm-hmm. There's not a soul in this room that knows what's involved in these plans. Now I roll them out and I said, I'm gonna have on-site security. They don't have that. I'm gonna have. They don't have that, approved, And that was my first big development, But everything I do, just like Peachtree Point, I try to raise the standard in Bradley County for, like at that time, for mobile home parks, now for RV parks, because Hiawassee Island is by far, without question, the nicest in this entire region. We've got beautiful covered bridge entryway. We're on the river, got riverfront lots, creekfront lots. I'm right where Chattata Creek enters into the river. I got a clubhouse with weight and exercise room, free laundry facility, big open meeting area with a full kitchen and 70-inch flat screen for parties, functions. Residents have access to that building 24/7. There's a keypad. Everybody has the keypad entry to it. They can use it as will. A fenced-in dog park, community pavilion, big playground system. Everything is paved or concreted. There's a concrete pad on every lot for the RV to sit on. It's 16 feet wide, 40 feet long, 2-car paved parking. Of course, all the streets paved. So it's a really nice RV community.
Where else can you go and enjoy the river whenever you want to without spending $400,000?
Right, exactly. And I am selling these lots.
How much are the lots?
Anything on the water, whether it be on the river or the creek, is $89.9.
And so for that, is there a fee?
There's a HOA fee. It's $140 a month, but that covers everything except their electric. They pay their own electric, the owners do, for their RV. But the $140 covers their city water, their sewer, their garbage service, their lawn care, their high-speed internet.
Oh, so the HOA includes your utilities?
Yeah, everything except the electric.
Oh.
Yeah.
So the ones on the water, what would a person have to spend for an RV that could go there?
If they own their RV already?
Yeah. No. If they're going to buy one, because $89,000 is not that big a deal.
No.
And $140 a month is not that big a deal.
I did a little riverfront subdivision downriver on the McMinn County side, just a mile from I-75. I sold 1 acre of raw land with nothing on it. Of course, it was a beautiful view down the main channel of the river. It was dock permittable. 1 acre for $265,000.
So what would a person spend for their RV typically? Because it's going to be just sitting there. You're not going to pull it out anytime, right?
Well, I have a mixture.
I guess you could, but...
Yeah, I have a mixture of people. Some live there full-time, have sold their houses and bought a nice RV and live there full-time.
What would that one cost? Typically.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure you'd spend $1 million, but what, is it like 60,000 or 80,000?
Yeah, 60 to 80 would certainly get you a really nice.
So for 160,
you
can be right on the river.
Home with all the amenities to go.
Can you walk? Do you own your lot?
Yes, yeah, they're individually
So it's like
deeded.
what do they call that?
So Tennessee Horizontal Property
Tennessee Horizontal Property Act.
Yeah, which I'd never heard of that
Yeah.
myself until I did this. I got this idea of my parents owned a lot in a resort, RV resort in Townsend, Pigeon Forge area. And they kept their camper up there year round. You know, Townsend's very convenient. Shoot up there, you raise your awning, you got all your dishes, all your linens, all your
toothbrush
clothes,
is there
yeah,
already.
everything is there. You're just set to go. And you know, they sold it several years after they bought it and made a killing on it. And I thought, you know, I'm burned out on trailer parks and rentals and all that. So I said, I'm going to design these where I can sell them. So when I approached my real estate attorney about doing that, that's when she told me, she said, well, this would be a Tennessee horizontal property regime. I'm like, what? What is it? I've never heard of it, you know. And the way she explained it and the way I explained it to everybody, it's almost identical to a condominium association. You own your condo free and clear individually, and you have shared ownership in the structure that houses your condo. This is real estate, so it's Tennessee horizontal property regime where you get a individually deeded lot, but you have shared ownership in the community that the lot sits within. So
I believe these apartments over here are like that too.
are they?
Yeah, they have the common area,
Yeah.
but you pay for your envelope
Yeah.
yourself, but you have a percentage of the overall common area that you have to pay.
Right. Yeah. It's you know, when I sell out, I've sold right now. I got 39 lots total. I've sold a third of them, 13, 14.
The ones that are on the water, do you own to the water?
Well, you know, TVA owns all waterfront.
Do you own to the TVA?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So you could-
Our lots end right there.
How far is that from the water, roughly?
40 to 60 feet, depending on.
You could throw a fishing rod that far.
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah. But you could walk right down to it. I mean, you could access it.
Anybody could.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the creek, like I say, we're right on Chattata Creek, is great fishing there. We have free kayaks. I don't, you know, like we were talking about raising the rent to a high level. I don't nickel and dime my residents. My laundry facility is free to use. I didn't do coin laundry because I didn't want to nickel and dime the people. I put a commercial ice maker in the kitchen. They get free 10-pound bags of ice anytime they want, as much as they want. I have a rack with kayaks on it right by the creek, free to use. I don't rent them. They use them anytime they want to.
Does the HOA, so the person that buys a $89,000 lot or one of the lots there on the river, do they own a portion of the bridge that goes across?
Well, the HOA, once I turn it over to the HOA,
Yeah.
now right now, you know, I'm still the declarant, so I have full control.
So at some point, the declarant will give its rights over to the homeowners.
Right.
You'll give them the checkbook,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
to speak,
And the bill file.
and the bill file. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, you know, there's.
And they'll elect a president and a treasurer, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Ted Moss has done a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew Ted from the Sheriff's Department
Yeah.
too. But, yeah. Golly. I got lots of stories, but you don't have that much time.
Man, you've done a lot since you were 32. How
Yeah.
could you pack all that in?
Yeah. Well,
That's a lot.
I've worked hard. I've carried some big loads.
You can't be much older than me, are you?
I'm 67. Yeah.
When you got out of the mobile home, were you just burnt out with it?
Yeah.
Because, see, I get that way sometimes.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I had 12 trucks. I had signed a contract during Katrina to haul 189 FEMA homes down to Louisiana. So I bought 4 toter trucks to pull the mobile homes. I bought 4 or 6 more Toyota Tacomas for escort trucks. I already had service trucks and all that. But I had 12 trucks, 20-something guys. And I just couldn't get a break. It was much worse than having rental property. I'd be at Daytona Bike Week or Myrtle Beach Bike Week or wherever. And one time, I think it was Myrtle Beach, I get a call, "Hey boss, we got a problem." I said, "What is it?" "Well, Paul hit a car pulling this trailer." I said, "Anybody hurt?" I said, "No, nobody's hurt, but it messed up that guy's new Mustang. He's pretty upset about it." I said, well, call the insurance, call the cops. I said,
Yeah.
no problem. So a couple hours later, phone rings again. Is this Mr. Thomas, Repo Depot? I said, yes, sir. He said, this is Chief of Police so-and-so, the city of Kingston. I said, yes, Chief. I said, I'm already aware of the accident with the Mustang. Accident with the Mustang? They hit a Mustang too? God. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, so they go through downtown Kingston. The rear escort driver, who you have to have radio communication with the driver that's pulling the home to tell him, you're swinging into a pole or whatever. His radio wasn't working. He didn't say anything, they're probably smoking dope. And, swings at the butt end of the trailer into a light pole right in front of the DA's office, catches the wire going to the street light. The wire falls and catches my DOT placard that you have to put on the back of the mobile home that gives your DOT number and your permit to haul. And so the chief called me and said, well, he says, they took out a telephone pole right here in front of the district attorney's office. He said, the way I know it's your company, I've got your DOT placard in my office. I guess you want it back. I said, yes, sir. 2 days later, they're going back to that same job. They've got, it's called a Jade machine. It's a specialized piece of equipment that goes under the back of a mobile home, will lift it up, tilt it, steer it. So if you're coming in a tight spot, you can turn the back of the home. $70,000 piece of equipment. They hook it up behind the truck, takes a 2 5/16 ball, they put it on a 2-inch ball. They're going up I-75, hit a bump, Jade machine passes them going through the median, crashes into the trees, and I thought, I've had enough. I said, I got a lot of rental income, I don't have to do this anymore. So I came home from that trip, and we had about 3 months worth of work on the board, and I called everybody in, I said, guys, I got good news and I got bad news. I said, the good news is we got about 3 months worth of work out there. There's 12 trucks out there. If you want to do that work, I'll set you up in the business. I'll owner finance you what vehicles you want, and I'll give you these jobs. Bad news is I quit. I'm not taking on another job. I'm done.
But did you have to finish the 3 months?
Yeah, they did most of it, but I did, fulfill what
Did you ever second guess yourself while you're doing that, or was you done?
No, I was done.
Like when you were 32 and you was on the bunk, you were done?
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, it's over. Just like with getting out of the mobile home park business, it was very good to me from the 1990s up until just, I don't know, I sold my last one 6-7 years ago, I guess. I had tens of thousands of dollars a month income that was, never ending. But you get to different stages in life, like I am right now. I just decided about 3 weeks ago that I'm going to retire, and I've started liquidating my equipment. I had the opportunity to bid on the property right next door to my RV resort, the George King estate. Yeah. I know you knew George.
Yeah, I knew George.
And everybody knew that I was there at the auction to buy that property. I had already offered the King family more than what it sold for at auction, but they said, no, we think we'll get more at auction. I said, okay, I'll see you there. About an hour and a half before the auction, I get a message on my phone from one of my investors, not the ones you know.
Right.
And he said, hey, if I'm gonna back you on this auction deal, I want $200,000 return. I went, man, that's a little stiff. I'd offered 100.
Yeah.
And so that kind of took me out of contention.
Yeah.
So the auction starts off at $4. Give me $4, give me $5. Give me $5, get it $6. It started off at $100,000 increments, went down to $50,000, down to $25,000, down to $10,000. When I got down to $5,000 increments, it was just me and the guy that bought it. $630, $635, $640, $645. I thought $645, 10% buyer's premium, $709.
Yeah, you have to do that math in your head.
$200 to him, that's $909. I ain't doing it. So I backed off. It sold for less than what I'd already offered for it. Well, I was pretty disappointed that I didn't get it. Because, see, I was going to develop that property. I didn't want the house. I had 2 people there at the auction with their checkbooks that were going to buy the King's house from me because I didn't want anything to do with it. I wanted that extra creekfront property on the other side of me to develop into phase 2. See, I'm the only one in the world that could do that.
Yeah.
So it was valuable to me. But when I didn't get it, I thought, you know, that would have committed me to work until I was 70. I'm 67 now. It'd take 3 years probably to do phase 2. And I said, I'm about done here. I think I'll just call it. You know, I'm good. So I sold a big tractor already. I got my excavator for sale, my Bobcat for sale, sold my dump trailer, sold my diesel pusher motor home. I'm just selling off a lot of this stuff that I don't use anymore and trying to get some pressure off. And
It takes a while to unwind all this stuff in our business because
yeah.
we get several factors. One, you got to think of the tax implications of selling something and recovering the depreciation. Is it the right time to sell or is it not? Can you get more for it? Can you not? Should you own or finance it? Should you not?
Right.
There's so many questions. It comes a point when they say, "Hey, you can make another 500,000." You say, "I'm not interested."
All right. Yeah, you know, my equipment, I could have one of my guys take that equipment and, you know, make $150 an hour per piece.
Yeah.
I don't want to fool with it. You know, like breakdowns and all that. I want to float the river in my big-ass boat and, you know.
What if you had to just float the river in a small boat? Would you still rather do it?
Yeah, my wife wants me to go back to a smaller boat. I love it.
But what I'm saying is, you can there's a trade-out.
Right.
When you get around 60, you start calculating money versus time.
Yes. Life is short.
And when you're in your 30s and 40s, you're not thinking about that.
Right, yeah. I look at the obituaries every day, and I do that as a daily reminder to myself how short life can be. Because every day now, at our age, there typically are more people in the obituaries our age and younger as there are the 80 and 90-year-olds. And those people had no clue that last week was their last week on this earth.
And what were we, I'll borrow a term from John Paul, why are we banging our heads against the wall?
All right.
In other words, what are we working for? If we've already got it, why?
Yeah.
You're almost, and in our business, you're risking it by doing it. I mean, you could have had this, you had you found the arrowhead?
All right.
Remember that? That could have been a disaster, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, I went through a tremendous amount of opposition over alleged Indian burial grounds, yeah. And,
I mean, that could happen on the next piece. You could have had that on the next piece.
well, it happened to me in the 90s at Peachtree Point Mobile Home Park there on Michigan Avenue. It was on city sewer. The sewer was engineered to be 8 feet deep. Now, this was a beautiful cow pasture. I mean, laid perfect for what I wanted to do. So I think it was TAG. Yeah, the TAG came out to start installing the sewer. And they go digging with the big excavator, beautiful black top soil, tunk, granite, solid granite. Move over 10 foot, tunk. The whole bottom was a total granite shell. 7-month delay, $100 and something thousand to blast it. My land payment was $5,000 a month, so there's another, you know. So it just about put me under right on the very front end. But yeah, you just never know when you take a chance and step out to do something like what we do, what you might run into.
I like to use this analogy. If somebody said, how long does it take you to drive to Nashville? You say, well, 2.5 hours. If they say, well, if you don't make it, it'll cost you $500. You say, well, better give me 3 hours. They can go up to where they say, what if you don't make it? It's going to cost you $20,000. You just say, you know, I just don't even want to go to Nashville.
Right, yeah.
I'll just stay here. I'm doing fine.
Yeah, and that's where I've gotten to now. I'm getting tired. I've got what I want out of life, and I'm ready to cut back. I'll never just sit and not do anything. You know, there's no possible way.
Yeah, but we're not selling T-shirts to people.
Right.
We're doing stuff that takes a commitment.
Yeah, and that's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to take on another development where I can put in infrastructure and run crews and own equipment and all that. Now, I'll start buying and flipping is what I plan to do.
You know, when I was at John Paul's office years ago, it was one Sunday, and I just had all I could take. And I just got in the car and I drove that way. And I ended up at Harrison Bay, you know, where everybody camps.
All right.
And I said, boy, when I get to where I can afford it, I'm going to just come down here and I'm going to cook out and fish. And I drove through there, and there were people with these $20 fishing rods, a pack of hot dog buns, and they were having more fun than I was having trying to make money to get there.
Yeah, right.
And it wasn't costing them nothing.
Right.
Who's the idiot?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I say, life is short, and you know you've got to enjoy life.
But now let's face it, it's been fun, this stuff, hasn't it?
Oh yeah,
this developing
and
you know,
it's like Johnny Holden says. You know, I said, Johnny, I said, you got more than you'll ever spend. I said, why do you come up here to this office day in and day out? Now that was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He said, Billy, he said, what would I do? Go down to Florida and chase that little white ball around with Rayburn? He said, I don't want to do that. He said, I live for the thrill of the deal. And that's the way we are, is, we love doing what we do, or we wouldn't still be doing it. But
I think maybe there's a difference when you get to developing, because you're committing a minimum amount of time, and it's just different than buying a house and flipping it, or buying a lot and dividing it into two, and nothing that can eat you.
And developing has changed so much.
Oh, God.
I mean, back when I started, there was no erosion and sediment control plans, no stormwater plan. You bought a piece of property, you called Clayton Wooden or
Clayton.
Remember when start cutting roads?
Remember when back in the old Ben Lewis days and Johnny Lewis days, they'd buy a piece of property, divide it up, gravel the roads, and have an auction by Saturday.
Yeah, all right.
Have a shotgun drawing while they had the auction. It was over.
Yeah, all right.
But now they could. I don't even know if they'd know how to do it today.
It's
you're almost
totally changed.
You've almost got to have an attorney and an engineer on staff.
Yeah.
To be able to deal with everything.
Yeah.
Entrance permits.
All right.
I've been waiting on an entrance inspection from TDOT for 2 months.
Yeah. Notice of
just
intent,
an inspection.
Land disturbance permit.
Notice of completion. Have you ever tried to get a notice of completion?
Yeah.
I've got some that I don't even have yet.
Yeah.
I've got one that's 5 years old, and they still haven't given to, because all the grass is not up.
All right.
That's what they said.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was 40 acres. How would you have grass?
Yeah. Some of their, I understand, the basics of what they're wanting to do.
They did then too. Ben Lewis wasn't going to shed water on nobody.
Right.
Yeah.
At my covered bridge going into my RV resort, anytime there's a heavy rain, Chattata Creek is brown with runoff and mud. Mm-hmm. Not from me, because it's coming to me. Mm-hmm. And I always snap a picture of it, just in case. The state comes out and says, we got a report. I said, well, hey, that's coming on me. I said, I didn't do that, years.
Going back to John Kinder, I spent my 20s with John Kinder.
Yeah.
I was down there every Saturday morning. I was there 3 times a week. That was one of the smartest. And I'm not just saying this. I've known about 10 smart people, and Johnny was one of the top 5, if not the smartest. Yeah. That guy was so smart.
Yeah. Well, Jim Sharp, used
Jim
John,
Sharp, yeah.
And Jim was pretty sharp too.
Jim was sharp.
And, Jim would always say, I always tell John Kinder, he said, when you're designing, put a little wiggle in them roads. He said, I don't want no straight roads. It's boring. And
John wasn't going to put a straight road
Well, I
anyway.
know.
He always told me, he said, he was so smart, John. You got any
He
John
was.
Kinder stories?
No, not really. You know, I know Mitch and Tony well, Randy Brown.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Randy did some work for me, you know, when they separated.
Yeah.
But
I got a picture of Johnny at his desk with that, you know, his right angles
he's drafting.
about 3 weeks before he died. And I did that phone thing where you put it in black and white, you know, make it like a pencil drawing, and I sent it to Mitchell. Well, that was an end of it. That was just an end of an era, wasn't it?
It was, and I told Tom Cake that many years before John passed. I said, whenever John Kinder passes away, I said that's going to change developing in this area.
John had he taught me so much.
Yeah, he's,
Just sitting down there, and was you ever? I don't know if you was around in that. If this would have been during the time, but on Saturday mornings they'd always cook lunch down there.
I never went
And
down for
that was every Saturday morning,
yeah.
man. Him and John, Alvin Goodwin.
Yeah.
You remember him, Alvin Goodwin?
I don't know if I knew Alvin.
But there was a bunch of people.
I know another Alvin.
Oh, yeah. Our buddy, right?
Yeah, the notorious.
Legendary.
Yeah, but boy, he's done good, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
Yeah,
He really is. Isn't he?
Yeah.
I wouldn't tell him.
Well, no, and you know, it's been a few years ago. I said, Alan, I said, you know, I'd like to do a deal with you, but I said, and I'm telling him to his face, I said, but you're a snake. And I said, I'm smart enough to know if I keep my eyes on the head of the snake, I'm a lot less likely to be bitten by it. But why do I want to do business with somebody like that? But we've done a lot of little deals, nothing to speak of. But yeah,
He would never do you wrong.
Yeah, no,
He would,
he's a very good guy.
Yeah.
Dwayne Goff wouldn't hang out with him if he wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
What about thinking of some older people around? It was just a different time back then. I try to think when it all just started changing.
Yeah.
And
Well, for me, the personality of Cleveland changed when they voted in liquor by the drink.
that's what I think. It was, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not, but it was just different. It was just, and I think when they started letting people access Paul Huff too, maybe about the time Walmart came in.
Right.
Maybe at that. Remember, Paul Huff was supposed to not have any outlets because it was supposed to be a.
Toby bought it.
He bought the. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked for Toby for a little while.
What'd you do for him?
God. Toby.
I worked for him several times.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, he called me up one day out of the blue, and you know he's real impulsive.
Very.
Great guy.
Great guy.
Yeah. But he said, Bill, he said, I want to get into mobile home parks. He said, I hear you're the man I need. I want you to come work for me.
Yeah. I want you to come up here to my office.
Yeah. I said, Tobe, I said, you know, I've never worked for anybody. I've always been self-employed. I said, but this sounds pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. So I went and met with him. Sure enough, he gives me a position, Senior Vice President of Communities. I set up a meeting. He wanted to buy a mobile home. He said, now I want to buy mobile home parks. I want to own the homes in the park. And he said, and I'm going to rent them the furniture in the home. He said, you watch me. He said, I'll make more money off the furniture rental than all the rest of it combined. Mm-hmm. And so I set up a meeting for us, because I had been in the mobile home business for a long time. And I set up a meeting with the president CEO of Oakwood Homes in North Carolina, Greensboro, Senior Vice President of Marketing, Senior Vice President of Manufacturing, all of them there. Told has his Learjet come pick us up at the little Cleveland airport. We fly over, we land, and they pull up in a limousine. We get out the jet, and I mean, this was corporate business at the highest level, you know. And so take us to the corporate office, up the elevator to top floor marble conference room. Tobe's got penny loafers on with no shoes.
No socks.
Now, boys, he said, I'm going to buy 1,000 mobile homes from you. Bill, you know these fellas. You make them treat me right. And I'm thinking, Tobe, get your feet off the table, man. But on the way back, Tobe was Tobe. He was in bad shape.
Yeah.
But I did that. We bought, I don't know how many mobile home parks. One day I took him to look at one in Chattanooga, and Rebecca was in the car with us. And I've known her for a long time. I worked with her mom, Mary Jane, at Life Challenge, and then we bought Earl's Restaurant from Mary Jane and Lloyd. But on the way back to Cleveland from looking at this park, Tobe gets one of those impulsive ideas. Bill, I got an idea. I want to build my own mobile homes. He said, find me a factory to buy. So we're going to build McKinsey homes. I'm like, Tobe, I said, yeah, let's not do that. I said, you know, let Oakwood or Clayton build them, warranty them, deliver them. I said, let's not. No, I want a factory. So I start looking at factories. We never did buy one, and then one day, out of the blue again, impulsive, Marcia, who was his right-hand person at the time, calls me up and said, Bill, Tobe's decided he's not going to pursue mobile homes anymore. Your tenure with us is over. Well, I had already started a new mobile home park of my own in Polk County called Nature's Point. I did Peachtree Point on Michigan Avenue, and then had started that one. So I just went right back to finishing it up. And,
Probably a relief at that point, sort
well,
of.
it was. I mean, that's, you know, I thought it might be a good opportunity, you know. I mean, he bought me a Ford Expedition within 2 weeks. I was hired the 1st of December, and right before Christmas, he walks in the office with a bunch of envelopes, passing out, you know, Christmas bonuses, looks at me, hell, you know, gives me one, a couple $1,000, I think it was, you know, but yeah, it was an experience just to be around him and hear some of his story.
He was smart too, wasn't he?
Well, he
on
was.
business.
Of course, Brenda was very smart.
You know, I was doing that third floor, supposed to do the third floor up there, and Olin was going to rent it, and they had to be in 30 days, and Marcia came in there and said, Toby, we've got to get this started. They've already given us the money, and they've got their furniture in the truck, in the transfer truck out there, already ready to come in, and they've got to be in business in 30 days.
Wow.
And he said, just a little bit more, and we'll have them where we want them. That was what he thought, wasn't
right. Yeah. He was a character.
He was a big, wide thinker. I remember one time I went in and he was eating peanut butter, and he said, boy, I really like this peanut butter. And the next day I went in, he had 6 jars there. Right. He just couldn't stop with one thing. No matter what he did, he just went all out.
Yeah, and if he got it in his mind, that's what he wanted to do,
he'd
or
get
that's
20
what he wanted to buy, you know, boom. You know, he's full force, full throttle, you know.
Now, John Kander, thinking of smart people, he was more of a methodical, already knew the answer type guy, didn't he? He already knew the answer.
Yeah, when it came to, you know, design of subdivisions and that sort of thing.
I went in there one time and I said, John, I said, why? I said, have you finished drawing that? And he said, no. And I said, why not? He said, because people like you keep coming in here bothering me.
So I guess after...
Could those people make it now, or is things just so much different? I mean, there's so many rules. I guess just finishing developing that, you're aware of all the rules, but I mean, they're adding rules by the day.
Oh yeah. I mean, anybody can still do it. It's going to take a lot more than what it used to.
You got to have a civil engineer day one.
Ben Berry or whoever. COP Engineering has designed the one I did in Polk County.
Which COP was that? Was that I've used them before too.
That was
but I
dad.
think what was his name? I always liked him.
Yeah, I don't remember. It's been,
But his son took over, didn't he?
yeah, right,
How's he do?
yeah. As far as I know, they do good. I haven't used them since the dad passed away.
Oh, he passed away.
I believe so.
I'm going to say Jim.
Jim Comp. Yeah,
Jim Comp.
Yeah, that's right. And I used another firm down on Brainerd Road or Gun Barrel Road. Gosh, I can't remember their name.
You ever use Reagan Smith?
No,
Boy, they do good.
no,
Simple.
no.
And you'd think the opposite because they're so big. But,
Yeah.
And Ben does good too.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I don't know where they're going to find these civil engineers to do this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
a
you
whole
know,
nother thing.
We need soil scientists.
Oh God. Good luck with that.
surveyors.
Yeah, how'd you deal with that up there? Did you have to get David Myers to do the soil mapping?
Oh, yeah. That was a nightmare. That
A
was
nightmare.
one of my delays. I went through 3 different delays, each one of them through a different bureaucracy. One, the county commission over the Indian burial grounds, one with the state septic inspector, had it soil mapped, had the system professionally designed.
Who
I
did
was-
that?
Golly, I can't remember their name. They're down off of Gun Barrel.
So they designed the septic system.
Yeah,
So
there's actually 5 different systems. It's a low pressure pump system, and I'd never done one of those before. But anyway, they designed the system, sent the plans to the state. State reviewed the plans, state approved the plans, state issued the permit for the plans. Guy out of the Chattanooga office calls me, and he said, Billy, before you start on this, he says, I want you to have those field lines staked out in the
Oh, I
field.
know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either.
grab it, maybe.
Yeah. He said, I want to see it staked out before you start on it. I said, okay. So I get Jimmy Richmond to come out and stake them out. There's hundreds of stakes. And this field is as level as you can get
Yeah.
almost. And so Gravett pulls in, looks out across all those stakes, cocks his head, does one of them numbers. I said, what is it? He said, this is not going to work. I said, what do you mean it's not going to work? He said, this field's not level enough. I said, this field is not level enough? Because like I say, it's as level a piece of property as you'll find. Well, a low pressure pump system turns out, and I didn't know this, you can't have more than 6 inches of difference in elevation, existing elevation, from one end of the line to the other, and some of these lines were 150 feet long. That doesn't take much.
Yeah.
You know, you can't detect that with the naked eye for the most part,
Yeah.
you know. And so he wouldn't approve it. So I had to have Richmond come back out, do a topo on 1-foot contours instead of 10-foot contours, take it back to the engineers, have them redesign it and wiggle it to follow those 1-foot contours, have Richmond come back out, stake it out again, and then he comes back out and he gets out of the car. Yeah, this will work. Go ahead. Yeah. But they made me have traffic rated tanks, which, you know, septic tank is what, 4,000?
Yeah, I thought they were traffic rated.
Yeah, no, these were like 10,000 apiece, and I had 10 of them. And they're pumped. There's a storage tank and a pump.
So it's just a
tank.
stronger lid, something like that.
The whole
Yeah.
tank
Yeah.
system has got rebar all the way
Yeah.
around it and lids. And and that was a freaking nightmare. And then, of course, TVA, I don't even want to go there, but, you know, they're a bear to deal with.
Even worse than the septic things.
Oh, yeah. I went to the post office one day. I have a post office box, and that's where I get all my mail, my bills, whatever. And I had a certified letter form in my P.O. box. I'm like, oh, Lord. And I'm waiting in line, I'm sweating it, you know. And
right.
I go up, I hand it to the girl. She goes back there and gets the letter, and she brings it back, and it's from the IRS. I said, oh, good.
Oh, God.
She said, what? She said, oh, it's IRS. I said, I was thinking it was TVA.
Oh,
I said,
Lord.
I'd much rather get one. I know what they want.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, they're a bear to deal with. Yeah. I've got a piece of property where I did the little riverfront subdivision. I took the plan that Randy Brown had done the original survey. Kenny West did the subdivision on the other side of the slough, and I bought everything on the opposite side, which was part of what Kenny had bought originally. but I take the site plan to Jimmy to have him cut these lots out and design them. And there's a little dotted line across the top of it that said 250-foot setback. I hadn't even noticed it. Jimmy said, Billy said, what is this 250-foot setback? And I said, I don't know, Jimmy. And my lots weren't but 300 feet deep. And the water's down at the bottom, like uphill. And so he gets looking at it. TVA had a 250-foot shoreline building setback on this property.
Which let you 50 feet.
Yeah, well, when you take off your rear setback, 35 feet.
Right.
You know, so that wasn't going to work, you know. And like I said earlier, one of those lots sold for $265,000, so there was a lot of money on the line.
Yeah.
And so we get to looking into it. We find an abandonment of restriction that was recorded back in the 50s.
Golly.
Abandoned that restriction on every tract in the entire region, and it says in the recorded abandonment, neither the federal government nor TVA authority has any further use for this restriction. Therefore, we are abandoning it on the following tracts. The next page is a list of all these tracts. The next paragraph is, this abandonment does not affect tract number 377, which was my tract, because it's owned by Bowater Southern Paper Corporation. A corporation cannot suffer change of title. So I call them up, a guy down in Alabama, TVA office, and I said, hey, you know, this is my property in my name, personally allow TVA or Bowaters doesn't have anything to do with it. I said, I need to get this lifted. Oh, well, that's not how it works. I said, well, what do I need to do? Well, first of all, there's a $5,000 non-refundable application fee, which I paid. And then you have to hire a TVA-approved appraiser, not any appraiser, but a TVA-approved appraiser, to appraise the value of the property with the restriction and the value of the property if we abandon the restriction. The kicker is you have to pay TVA the difference. Turned out to be $189,000.
Golly.
And I said, you know, this is not right. You know, you did it for free for everybody else, and you have a recorded document that says you have no use for it. And I told my attorney, I said, just sue them. I said, Billy, if you do that, you know, they'll tie your property up forever. You'll probably spend more than the $189,000 to defend it, because you'll have to take it like Alan did, you know, take it to the Fifth Circuit or wherever. And she said, my advice to you is just to pay it. So I've got to pay it. They're about to send me a bill right now for it.
Looks like you could call a congressman or somebody.
Well,
or a senator.
You would think so.
You know, they do a lot. They can do a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, now that the new administration is in, maybe, you know, I know a few people. Maybe I can get something done, but I don't.
You got to try it.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of money for nothing, basically. And Kelly Thompson owns Professional Title. She does all my closings for the most part. She says, Bill, you don't even need an abandonment, or they're calling it a deed modification. You don't even need a deed modification. You just need a release of this restriction. They should be able to just to do that. But that's not their way of doing things. So I don't know. We'll see how that one hadn't fully played out yet, but it's getting real close.
I had a similar problem with the railroad easement. And I drove all the way to Atlanta to the main office. And went up the elevator to some guy's office, and he just signed it.
Really?
And I said, thank you very much.
Wow.
And I left. I couldn't have believed it. I just didn't believe it. But I ran when I have something like that, I laminate it.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Because I don't,
frame
man,
it.
I mean, you can get in all kinds of, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. You can get in trouble on stuff.
Yeah, they could shut you down, just like the county commission when I started Hiawassee Island up there. Somebody, name a name, went to one of the commissioners and said, hey, I think he might be up there digging up Indian burial grounds. We hadn't even started digging at that point. You know, we were still designing and engineering. Well, that county commissioner took that rumor and ran with it, rescinded my previously unanimously approved rezoning, which stopped me dead in my tracks. And so I had to hire an archaeological firm out of Chattanooga. I paid them extra money to dig with equipment instead of shovel digging. and they dug in a grid pattern across the property, sifted the dirt that came out of the holes, looking for any evidence of burial grounds or civilization, burn pits, that sort of stuff. Didn't find squat, and took that back to them, and then they said,
And it
okay.
looks like that would have not even been in their jurisdiction. That's not a zoning thing. That's a.
Well, they ordered a state investigation.
Didn't that happen to Jim Sharp over in Princeton Hills?
Yeah. But when they ordered the state investigation, they put Bentley in charge of it. I've got a great rapport with Bentley. I've got a great rapport with everybody who is anybody, as far as I know. But so the next morning, my first call was to Bentley. Hey, what are we going to do about this investigation they're wanting to do? Well, Bentley's gone on vacation for the next 2 weeks. I'm like, oh man, I said, I can't let this sit for 2 weeks. So I called the director of archaeology for the state of Tennessee in Nashville, top guy over archaeology in the state. Tell him what I'm dealing with. He says, well, Mr. Thomas, he says, if you have burial grounds on your property, we probably already know about them. He said, let me do a little in-house study in our computer files and our records. And he said, I'll get back with you. So about 2 days later, I get an email from him. He says, we have no record of burial grounds on your property. You are free to continue with your development. However, if you do unearth human remains, you are to stop immediately, contact the sheriff's department, the coroner's office, and our office.
Sure, you'd do that anyway.
Sure. And he said, the good news is, even if you do unearth human remains, you can still develop your property. You just have to protect that area. And he said, knowing what you're doing, he said, put a decorative fence around and a plaque, here lies the remains, of Cherokee Nation, whatever. And so then the next paragraph, however, there is an area of concern on your property. I've included satellite imagery. So I turn the page and there's satellite imagery of my property. He's got this area circled and an arrow drawn to it. Well, I knew exactly what it was when I saw it. So I go out there to snap a picture of it. This field where I developed the RV resort had been plowed and farmed for decades.
Years.
Well, there's a major transmission line that goes through it. Well, where they didn't plow up against the pole, the dirt was mounded up.
Yeah, right.
But he couldn't see the top of that pole from his satellite imagery. He just saw the mound of dirt. So like I say, I snapped a picture of it and I emailed it back to him. And I said, look, I'm not trying to be smart, not being flippant about what you do for a living, but I may have the first ever in history Indian burial mound complete with an electrified totem pole. He said, just go ahead, son.
You ever notice when you get to the real top, on some people, they're more sensible than they are below.
Most of them will apply common sense.
That's right. When you get like the guy went and got the railroad easement signed, he had the authority and had the sense.
Yeah, I need to find that guy at TVA.
That's what I'm saying.
really
There's
do.
probably somebody up there that says,
Yeah.
well, this is because they didn't get there to those positions by accident.
Right, yeah, there's, I don't know, we'll fight that battle here soon.
But I don't know what's next. What are you going to do now after you get that? Well, you still got a ways to go, right?
No,
I mean, you got to sell out.
I'll have an obligation up there, for quite some time till I sell out.
What, a year and a half?
Year? Yeah. Of course, I've opened it up, even though the lots are designed to sell, because of my high overhead, I've opened it up to long-term renters.
Sure, yeah.
So out of 39 lots, I only have, I think, 2 available now. And those little 40 by 100 lots rent for $640 a month. And I don't pay anything. So that's pretty good. So
Well, you
it's
could
pumping
sell the
out.
ones you've got leased.
Yeah, I tell all my
Yeah.
renters, I said, these lots are for sale. They're designed to be sold.
Yeah.
I said, so if
And
somebody...
you could sell it to somebody and they could just lease it to them.
Yeah, they can't lease it for short term. If I would let somebody buy a lot and put a camper on it and Airbnb it, I've been sold out 2 years ago. But this is designed for owners, not for in and out transient. Unless we have the clubhouse facility, you wouldn't want a family coming in for a weekend, trashing your clubhouse, and then packing up Sunday and going on. So I don't do any short term, but it's pumping out some pretty good cash right now, and that, like I say, offsets my overhead until I've got 2 pending right now that are going to close soon. One lady's closing on the sale of her house Tuesday. Another one gave me a deposit last week, and her house is being listed currently. So, they're selling, not as fast as I wanted them to, but as long as I still own some of them, I'll have some obligation. But as far as the development, it's 98% complete. All the
It
pads
looks
are-
good.
Yeah, it
That's
turned
where
out
me and
really-
Alvin ride our bikes through there.
Yeah.
We've been watching it go up.
Yeah, y'all cruise through there sometime. Yeah, it turned out really good. We just did a lot of extensive landscaping and trying to dress it up. Had a lot of complaints several months ago that this last winter was our first winter. The last spring and summer, everything was as green as could be. We're mowing it, it looked good. Whatever that was came up naturally. And I had no way of knowing that in the winter it was going to go completely dormant, die completely out, leaving me with nothing but mud. Of course, all of our streets are paved and our pads are concreted, but still, if you step off your concrete or you go down where the dog park is, you're going to walk through mud if it's wet and muddy. So I was getting a lot of complaints with that. So I've got all the grass established now, done a lot of landscaping, so we're pretty good at this point.
One thing I've noticed over around that area, it's about 4 or 5, maybe 6 degrees cooler over there in the summer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because of the water, I guess.
A little foggy sometimes.
Paul Renner lives down the road on the right, doesn't
All
he?
right. Yeah.
Up on the hill, the bluff.
Yeah. I bought one of the mobile home parks I had on South Lee Highway. I bought from Rob.
Oh,
Another good one.
yeah.
Bruce.
Yeah.
Rob's dad. Now,
Don't forget Bruce.
Yeah. Years ago, oh gosh, 20 plus years ago, I went to Bruce and I was looking at selling, I think, one of the quadruplexes. And I said, Bruce, I just don't know if I want to sell it or not. And he said, Billy, you'll never go broke making a profit. So I thought, you're right. So I sold it, made my money, and rocked on. So, but yeah, that's Della, Rob. They're good people.
We could fill up this whole property with the people that we've known in this business that have passed away.
Oh yeah, yeah. Clayton Wooden.
Wooden, yeah.
John Kinder, yeah. John Paul. Yeah. I miss old John. I know you do.
Mm-hmm. They'll be mentioning our names one day.
Yeah, I wonder how. That little SOB.
Yeah. You remind me a lot of Steve Williams.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's not as pretty as I am.
Well, you and him are about the same. I don't know, Steve's maybe older than you, I guess.
Yeah.
So what else is going on?
Well, that's about it. Like I say, I'm in the process of quitting. I was on my boat today, and we took it out yesterday. First time we've had it out this year. I was kind of anxious to do that because at the end of the season last year, I had gone down to Chattanooga Riverfront and I'll rent a slip there and stay overnight, and we could walk downtown Chattanooga and eat, whatever. Had some friends come up from Atlanta, picked them up there, took them down through the gorge. This was right about the time the leaves were changing. So I came back up, dropped them off. It was getting late, and I wanted to get back to my slip at Agency Creek. And of course, I've got all kinds of sonars and radars and stuff. When I get off of the Tennessee onto the Hiawassee, it had gotten dark and fog started setting in. And I had a handheld spotlight. The boat's got a big spotlight on the front. And I was using my handheld, and I was looking where the buoys are, and I've got navigation line to follow. And I'm easing up through there, doing a good job. I thought, I'm going to turn on my big spotlight. So I just, for a minute, I'm looking down at my control for my big spotlight, boom, 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 ran aground. And I'm like, oh, Lord, my alarm's going, beep, 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 motor stalled. This thing's got 2 big Cummins diesel turbocharged engines, monster boat. So I'm in a panic then. Can't see land anywhere, and I'm on a narrow part of the Hiawassee River, so I know there's land right there. I can't see any buoys anywhere. Totally disoriented, didn't know if I needed to be going that way or this way. Cranked the boat back. My wife, poor Tina, She was scared to death. She's down there, oh, God, please, I've been good, Lord. Yeah. And I said, well, we'll get out. So I went back and I stuck a rod down, and of course it's just muck, just soft muck, you know. And I have a bow thruster, so I hit my bow thruster and my front end would move. So I knew it was just my props I'd gotten out of the main channel and got in some of that mucky mud. So I thought, you know, maybe I can get out of this thing. So I cranked those motors back up. I put it in reverse. Oh, crap. So then I start calling people. Call Bobby Patton. Called Scott Jones. So they're both on a cruise in Bahamas.
Yeah.
Called my buddy Chad LaFuse. He's on his way to come home and get his boat. He had a pontoon just to see if he could help. He's real good with water and boats. And so I go back there, and I knew I wasn't stuck bad. And I said, if I can just figure out which way I need to go, I can probably put this thing in four-wheel drive and get out of here, you know. So went back up, you know, and crank it back up. Gave it a little more throttle this time. And there I go, you know, I got out. You know. But it scared me to death, scared Tina to death, but I had no way of knowing because I just eased back to my slip after that. You know, because like I say, you couldn't see anywhere, you know. And I'm going by my navigation screen. And so all winter I've been wondering, you know, I hope when I take that thing out, I don't have a vibration or that one of my rudders is not bent, you know. But it did fine. We got it up to speed, and it's really too big to be on the Hiwassee because I put out a humongous.
You overdid it, maybe.
Yeah, but we've been looking for a condo in Panama City for about a year and a half. And, you know, condos, $500,000-600,000. HOA fees are astronomical. Insurance is astronomical. And after looking for as long as we did, we had narrowed it down. We wanted to be at Edgewater Resort in Panama. And we narrowed it down to the floor plan that we wanted. We want a front bedroom with a sliding glass door balcony access where we could lay in bed and look at the beach in Yocha. Yeah. So we were getting close, but after a year and a half of shopping, I just kind of like I did in prison that day, I just came to my senses. I said, you know, I live on the river, I work on the river, I recreate on the river. I need to just buy a boat big enough that I can take it to Florida in the winter.
That's right.
So I just changed directions and started looking at these boats. Well, I bought this boat and saved hundreds of thousands, even though it cost hundreds of thousands. It was a lot cheaper than buying a condo, no HOA fees and no astronomical insurance.
That's the way to go. That's the way to go, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So we were in Panama 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I went to a brand new marina that's just now opening. They still haven't opened the restaurant. They're gonna have a tiki bar and all that. They have a store. But I'm thinking about renting a slip there for the year so that when the boating season ends here, I can take it down to the Gulf and get me a slip and then use that as my winter home. You know, because it's 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, you know, washer, dryer. I mean, it's got everything. You know, so. That's the plan right now.
As Jim Sharp said, that's your 5-year plan, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. I hope longer than that. But, yeah, I have family. You know, I said my parents came here back in the 40s. My dad was raised on the Chesapeake Bay.
Where?
Yeah, in Chrisfield, Maryland, which is right on the Chesapeake Bay. In fact, the road that goes to Chrisfield, Maryland dead ends into the bay. Mm-hmm. If you go too far, you'll end up in the bay. But it's the crab capital of the world. But that's where he was raised. And my mother, her dad, who was the 103-year-old Church of God preacher, he built the Chrisfield Church of God. That's what he would do. Mm-hmm. He would go and build churches, pastor them, establish, move on. But anyway, so I have a lot of family there. My dad was one of 16. Yeah, so I got a lot of cousins. Mm-hmm. Still have a couple of aunts living. Most of them are gone now. But, you know, I would love to go down to the Gulf first. And then, you know, my boat has done what's called a Great American Loop, where you start at the Great Lakes typically, you go down the Ohio into the Mississippi, down the Mississippi into the Gulf, down around the tip of Key West, back up the East Coast to New York, and then cut across to the Great Lakes. It's a year-long trip.
Well, that'd be a lot of fun, wouldn't it?
Oh, it would. You know, see all those port cities, and yeah, I'd love to do it, but I don't know that I ever will. But but I want to at least go to the Gulf this year. We didn't do any long trips last year, being the first year having the boat, because there's a lot to learn about it. And it's got autopilot. I don't have a clue how to work the autopilot, but that's for out in the open waters. My boat's been to the Bahamas twice. Not me, but the previous owners. But there's just a lot I don't know yet that I need to. And my wife, since I ran aground, she's kind of leery. She doesn't want to get.
It'll be a long time to outlive that with a wife.
I told her, I said, look, me and a couple of my buddies, we could take it down. You can drive down, and that way we'll have a car there too. You know, so we may end up doing that. But yeah, you know, I don't know what I'm gonna get into other than that. You know, I hope to, you know, be a part of the Vol Navy, go to the Vol games, you know, in the boat, and like I say, we go down to Chattanooga pretty regularly. We'll get a overnight slip at Island Cove and eat at Amigos, stay the night, then lock down and go down to the Chattanooga riverfront, spend the night there. But this year I want to make some longer trips, go to Calhoun's on Loudon
Did you
Lake.
find it was hard to do that when you were in the midst of that development?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's hard to get away.
It is, yeah. And that was one thing that I asked Alan Jones. He came into B&B Marina one time, and I was sitting there having lunch by myself, and he had just redone the Earl's Restaurant sign. Well, when me and my now ex-wife rented that restaurant, I bought it for her because she was in the restaurant business, always wanted her own restaurant. But that was part of our requirement from Alan, was if you lease that restaurant, you've got to refurbish that old Earl sign, and we did. But that was, you know, back in the early 90s. So it hadn't been touched since we did it. So Alan just had it redone. And I was sitting there at B&B, and I was looking at his post about redoing the Earl sign, and I was about to comment, and he walks in the door.
What are the odds?
Yeah, and I said, hey, I was just about to comment on your post about the Earl sign. He said, what do you know about Earls? I said, well, I used to lease it from you back in the early 90s. You did? He said, can I sit down? I said, yeah, sure. So he sat with me, but yeah, I asked him, I said, Alan, and I probably scared him to death when I said this. I said, Alan, there's something I've always wanted to ask you. He's like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
I said, you know, no more than what I have, this thing never stops. I've always got to be making decisions and doing things. I said, you know, I can't go to the beach and just put it all behind me and forget it. I said, how do you do it with all that you have? He said, well, I just have good people under me. And he said, everybody delegates, you know, I delegate to them and they handle it. And I said, you know, I heard that very same thing on CNN. Danny Deutsche was interviewing Warren Buffett. And Deutsche asked Buffett, and he said, Mr. Buffett said, a lot of people out there, you know, are entrepreneurs and would like to know if you have a secret or a tidbit that you would tell them that might help them. And he said, well, what I typically do, and this is Warren Buffett speaking, he said, what I typically do is I buy corporations. And he said, and when I buy a corporation, say like Shaw Carpets in Dalton, Georgia, he said, I don't know the first thing about the carpet industry, but I hire the smartest guy there is in the carpet industry, and I put him in charge of this company for me. I'm done. I don't have to do anything.
What if he quits, though? That's my fear.
Yeah, I guess you start looking for the next one, the second smartest. But you know, you have to, you know, the bigger you get, you have to delegate, just like with the rental property. You know, you can only fix so many.
I like to say small enough where I can manage it.
Yeah.
That's more my speed.
Yeah. Well, I'm much more hands-on.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
That's just in our nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know Elmer Earls?
Elmer. I mean, I don't know him personally, but yeah,
I
know
got
who
this
he is.
cup at his place, Hippie Beads, last week. He's a character.
Has he been on?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I got this pictures. Can you just get that, Gwen?
Yeah, you've had a lot of
I
really,
had a lot of good people.
a lot of interesting people, a lot of influential people. And that's why I was kind of wondering, what the heck's he want me on there for?
You're very interesting.
Well, I got a lot more stories that we hadn't gotten into. But
You've been very successful.
Yeah. Well, I've worked hard, you know. And like I say, I've carried a big load.
You get into stuff when you don't really know how to do it. You
Yeah.
tend to say, I'll figure it out as I go.
That's how I've always been, even to this day. Back in the 90s, when I bought that 50 acres from Eugene Calfee, dairy farmer, to do Peachtree Point Mobile Home Park, I offered him $500,000 for that 50 acres in the early 90s. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I knew it laid the way I needed. City sewer was on the corner of it, even though it was in the county. The sewer manhole was on this property, so that gave me access to sewer. Had to pump to it, but that's fine. But anyway, when I made him that offer, I didn't have but $5,000 to my name. Had no clue how I was going to come up with $500,000. This is my first big development. I just knew I could do it. I didn't know how I was going to do it.
How'd you come up with that much money?
Really strange.
You didn't sell drugs, did you?
No, wasn't that strange. Had a buddy of mine who was the general manager of the Clayton Homes lot here in Cleveland. And so he tells people at Clayton corporate office, he was pretty big in the company. He's like regional salesman of the year and stuff. But he tells somebody at the corporate office of Clayton Homes. Now, I said earlier, I never had any experience in the mobile home business whatsoever. I was developing it for that residual lot rent income. So I've been, to Bank of Cleveland, First Citizens, where I had established credit, hundreds of thousands of dollars of credit, and they wouldn't touch it because it's a mobile home park. They don't want to do mobile home parks. Well, I'm getting to where my contract was running out with Mr. Calvin. He's an old school dairy farmer, great family. And so I wasn't able to get the financing. I called him up. I said, Mr. Calvin, I said, I'm having a little trouble getting the money to buy this property from you. I said, but I will get it. I said, please don't sell it out from under me. He said, buddy, he said, me and you shook hands, didn't we? I said, well, yes, sir. He said, well, when we shook hands, that property became yours. All you got to do is pay for it now. I said, well, I appreciate that, sir. So I told him, I said, well, look, I'll tell you what I'll do, and this is only fair. I'm tying up basically $500,000 of your money or your assets. I'll start paying you interest payments on that amount at whatever rate I chose at that time. And so I started making him interest payments. I think I had to make about 2 before I get this call out of the blue. Phone rings. It's Billy Thomas. I said, yes, sir. So, Billy, this is David Barton, Diversified Lending Division of Clayton Corporate Office in Knoxville. He said, I understand you're wanting to develop a large-scale mobile home park in Cleveland. I said, yes, sir. He said, could I ask you a few questions about it? I said, well, sure. He said, how much property do you have? I said, 50 acres. He said, how many sites do you anticipate having? I said, well, it's currently designed for 234 lots. He said, He said, how much did you pay for the land? I said, $500,000. He said, how much do you estimate your development cost will be? I said, well, it's going to be done in 6 phases. I said, phase 1 will consist of, I think it was 34 lots. I said, it will be a little more costly because I got to put my sewer pump station in to serve the entire development. Got to do my beautifully landscaped entrance with my mountain stone signs and all that. So I said, my cost per lot will be a little more. And I said, it's going to be around $330,000 for phase 1. He said, how about phase 2? And I said, well, it's going to be about the same number of lots, but it'll take about $200,000 or so. And I could hear him clicking as I'm giving him these numbers. He said, well, it sounds like you need about $1 million to start with. I said, yes, sir, that's right. He said, Clayton Homes would like to finance this project for you. I was just like blown away. I had no dealings with them ever before, but they knew, they're trying to capture the market. Well, when I planned to develop that, I was only looking at one income, that being that lot rent. I wasn't going to own any homes. I wasn't going to do nothing. I just wanted that residual income. They called me back, guy from manufacturing, Clayton Home. He said, hey, would you be interested in being one of our dealers? I said, well, yeah, sure. He said, can you get a dealer's license? I said, yeah. I said, it's a pretty simple process. And he said, well, if you'll get a dealer's license, we'll give you a $300,000 line of credit for floor planning. He said, and we'll start sending you homes. And he said, then you can start making the money on the sale of the homes as well. I thought, awesome. When I decided to do that, I went from one income on that project to 9 different incomes.
Golly.
The profit from the sale of the homes, the resale of the tires and axles. Once you set that home up, you pull them. We would stack them in rows. A guy would come in a tractor trailer with a bobcat and forks. He'd come in, he'd separate them because you got brake axles and idler axles, and then the tires, he'd stack them in, I think, rows of 5 or 6. And he'd call me up at the office, say, come on down, I'm ready to count them out. He'd count, he got 35 brake axles, 42 idler axles, 60 tires, cash money, thousands of dollars. And so that was my traveling money, that was my vacation money. I did a TVA energy right community. TVA would give me $550 for every home I brought in. I was TVA's, what they call the Rising Star Award winner, big black tie event at Opryland where they awarded, and this was over the whole, I think, 7-state TVA district. But I was the Rising Star Award winner for the nicest mobile home park development in the TVA district. And so I go to this black tie event, and they had the stage and big screens on either side, and the president, CEO of TVA. And now we'd like to present the Rising Star Award winner for the #1 mobile home park development, and they're flashing pictures of Peachtree Point. Billy Thomas, Cleveland, Tennessee. And I'd go up and I'd get my plaque and pictures. Had a private concert with Leanne Womack, had backstage photo session with her. You know, pretty big deal. But they gave me, like I say, $550 per home. I don't know how much that ended up. Clayton Homes has their own finance company, which is Vanderbilt Mortgage. They would finance my buyers, and I could bump the rate. So if you bought a home from me, they'd approve you at 6%. I'd say bump it to 8%. I'd get that extra 2%. So when I had 70-something homes sending 70-something mortgage payments, and I got $40, $50, $60 a piece, that got up to about $7,000 a month in what they call portfolio income. I mean, it just opened up.
Well, they got that figured out, don't they?
They have their own insurance company, Clayton Insurance. They said, we'll make you an insurance agent for us. We'll give you 28% commission. So when they would approve a buyer, and because they were so invested in me, they knew I had to sell homes.
Yeah.
They would approve anybody I sent to them. My very first sale was a couple that had relocated to Cleveland from Florida, strike against them there for relocation new to the area, self-employed, strike against them there, were in current bankruptcy, waiting discharge. They approved them for a brand new double wide. I knew then I've got it made.
Yeah.
You know? They didn't turn down anybody, ever. You know? And so I sold all these mobile homes and had all this income coming in. It was awesome. And I had a company out of California, Summit Communities, that wanted it more than I did. So I sold it. I had completed phase 1 and phase 2, total of 77 lots. Sold it for $1,563,000.
Were you glad to get out from under that? Was it wearing on you by then?
Yeah, the thing with hitting the rock in the first, I never recovered from that. I mean, that was a big financial blow right at the front end, unexpected. Yeah. So I struggled the whole time because of that. So, yeah, it was good. But so that's, like I say, I've done a lot of stuff. I've done everything in the mobile home business except manufacture homes. Buy them, sell them, move them, repo them, finance
I'm looking forward to the next 10 years, aren't you? 15, 20 years?
Yeah, I hope we make it. Yeah.
Let's not get involved in anything that's going to take up a lot of time. That's not what we enjoy.
I'm done, yeah. I'm all about enjoying life now. Yeah, I've done about all of it. Like I say, I'll buy and flip, something simple, not even a renovation,
Not even if you have to fix it up. Just if I have to keep it, that's fine too.
I don't any employee.
You're really glad you didn't buy that other property on
I am
Upper
now.
River Road.
Yeah,
that would have been what we're talking about not doing.
Yeah, right.
That would have done.
Exactly.
That'd have been
Yeah.
your $150,000 rock.
Yeah, I was really hoping to get it,
Yeah.
you know, because it's more valuable to me than anybody on earth.
Yeah.
But now that I didn't get it and I've made the decision I've made, I'm very comfortable and very happy with it.
You could have been where you couldn't have made that decision.
Yeah, no. And then right at the end of the auction, as soon as I find out that I didn't get it, and I'm at that point I'm kind of down, I go over and talk to the guy that did get it, and I gave him my card, and I said, hey, I own the RV resort. Oh, okay. I said, look, I don't have any interest in this house, and that's what he really wanted, a river house. You know? I said, but it's this property I want because I was going to develop that into phase 2. I said, if you'll sell me that, I will buy it if you're reasonable. And so I just done that. Like I say, I'm kind of down and out. My phone rings. It's my guy that works for me at the resort. Hey, boss, we got a problem. I said, Chris, this is no time to mess with me. I said, you know, I didn't get the bid. I said, you know, no, boss, I'm sorry, man. But he said, I just ran your zero-turn mower off in the creek. It's completely underwater. I'm like, oh, no. And I'm still hoping he's messing with me. So I drive over there, and I walk over to the pavilion where he was mowing at, and I see the seat to my zero-turn up against the other bank floating. And then I look down, and I see the skid marks. He's right on the edge, hit a bump, and it went over, and he couldn't stop it. And he went off with it, running, blades engaged and all. Of course, he didn't get hurt, but... So he said, well, I'll get the excavator, we'll hook a chain to it, we'll get it out. I said, no, I said, I'm not fooling with it. I said, I'm done, I'm going home. And so I let it sit there underwater all weekend. We got it out Monday. He drains the oil, drains the gas, fired right up.
Is that right?
I said, well, I don't want it. I said, to me, it'll always give me problems.
Yeah.
And so he actually bought me another one, a replacement. Wasn't as good as the one I had.
Yeah.
But he bought me a replacement, and I told him, you can have that one. I said, I just, like I say, I don't want it. So I leave from that scene to go to Willie's to get something to eat. My wife hadn't eaten. And so I go back to the restroom, and there's Eric Spencer, the auctioneer, and his family. And they're sitting there right by the booth next to the bathroom. I didn't speak to them on the way in. I went in, I used the bathroom, washed my hands, went to leave the bathroom. The doorknob had broken. I'm trapped in the bathroom. So I had to get my knife
What are
and
the
pick
odds?
the doorknob. Yeah. So I come out and I walked over to their booth and I said, man, what a day. I said, first of all, obviously I didn't get the bid at the auction. I said, then my guy calls me from next door. He's run my zero-turn off in the creek and submerged it completely. And I just now got locked in the bathroom. Eric says, man, you need to just go home. I said, I know, I'm going. Yeah, so, yeah, but it's all good, you know.
Well, I think everything's going good, and let's not get involved in anything else.
Yeah, no, that's a deal.
Cheers
Yes, sir.
to John Paul, Douglas.
Yes, sir. Our old buddy.